Okay, so what if you had a time machine for your business? And no, I'm not talking about going back to buy some winning stocks, though that would be nice. I mean a time machine to ask any question about any moment in your company's history and get a perfectly clear answer. It sounds like sci-fi, right? But it's not. It's a totally revolutionary way of thinking about data, and it's what we're breaking down today. So how does this data time machine actually work? Let's find out.
All right, here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the big problem this time machine is trying to solve. Then we'll dive into the new kind of system memory that makes it possible. We'll cover some real-world examples, talk about the huge strategic advantages, and wrap up with why this is so critical for our AI-powered future.
So first up, let's talk about the data time machine problem. You know, why most systems out there can only tell you about what's happening right now. This is a huge challenge, but it's so common that most businesses have just kind of learned to live with it, accepting that their data pretty much has amnesia about the past.
I mean, think about this question for a second. What did our business look like last Tuesday at 2:15 p.m.? It seems like a perfectly reasonable thing to ask, right? Or how about, hey, who is the account manager for this customer before that big change last month? For most systems, answering these simple questions is, well, it's incredibly hard, sometimes even impossible. And it all boils down to a really fundamental flaw in how they're designed to remember things.
And this right here, this gets to the absolute heart of the problem. What we usually have are just snapshots, the final picture. But what we desperately need is the full story. Think of it this way. Most systems today act like a camera that only saves the last photo you took. Every time you update a customer's address or change a product's price, you're essentially taking a new photo and throwing the old one in the trash. The history? Gone. What we really need isn't a camera, it's a movie camera, something that records the entire story, every single frame, every change that led to that final picture.
Okay, so if we want to build that movie instead of just collecting snapshots, how do we do it? Well, that brings us to a whole new kind of system memory. We're talking about two big ideas here, event sourcing and temporal modeling. Now, I know those might sound a little technical, but stick with me, because the core concept is actually super intuitive. Probably the easiest way to get your head around this is to think of it as a perfect DVR for your entire system. You know, a digital video recorder. It's not just interested in the final score of the game, it records every single play, the kickoff, the fumbles, the touchdowns, the final whistle. That's what this system does. It captures every single action, every decision, every tiny data change as a unique event, and it stores it permanently.
And that's where the second piece, temporal modeling, comes into play. See, it's one thing to record all the events, but it's another to understand how they all connect. Temporal modeling is all about understanding the relationships between those events over time. It's about connecting the dots so you don't just know what happened, but you know when it happened, and most importantly, you understand the why behind every single change. This is how you unlock the mystery of cause and effect in your business. So, how does it work in practice? It's actually a pretty simple four-step process. Step 1. You capture every single event, and these events can never be changed. Step 2. You organize all those events onto a perfect timeline. Step 3. Because you have that timeline, you can now reconstruct any moment in time. You can literally hit rewind and see exactly what your system looked like at any point. And that leads to Step 4. You can explain any outcome. You just follow the chain of events to see exactly how you got there. Simple, right?
All right, so moving from theory to reality. This all sounds great on paper, but what kinds of real-world problems does this actually solve? Let's get into some high-impact use cases and see how this time machine is tackling some of the most expensive, most frustrating challenges that businesses face every single day.
Okay, here's a big one, a classic problem that I'm sure many of you are painfully familiar with. You've got these monolithic legacy systems. You know, that ancient ERP or that mainframe application that was built before you were born. It's the backbone of the business, but it's so expensive and risky to replace that you're just stuck. You can't innovate, you can't move forward, you're completely trapped by your own technology.
Well, here's the solution. You can actually modernize without rebuilding. This is the amazing part. You don't have to do a terrifying rip and replace. Instead, you set up a parallel engine that just kind of listens in on that old system, mirroring everything it does and creating that perfect DVR recording on the side. What does this mean? It means you can layer all the cool new stuff, advanced analytics, AI, new applications on top of this new engine without ever touching the fragile original. It lets you modernize piece by piece, gradually, with absolutely zero downtime. It's a total game changer.
All right, let's talk about another huge headache, explainability, or more accurately, the lack of it. You know the drill. Something goes wrong or an auditor shows up and suddenly everyone is scrambling to answer the big question. Why? Why did this inventory number suddenly change? Who on earth approved that payment? When exactly did this customer's record get updated? And way too often the real answer is a collective shrug. Nobody knows for sure.
The solution here is to achieve full, bulletproof traceability. By building a time-aware graph of every single event and decision, you create an unbreakable audit trail. This gives you the superpower to instantly reconstruct the exact state of your system at any point in the past. An auditor asks what things looked like on June 1st of last year? No problem. You need to generate a GDPR or a SOC 2 compliance report for a specific time window? You can do it automatically. It turns traceability from this painful manual archaeology project into something as simple as running a query.
Okay, so we've seen how this tech solves some really tough problems, but let's get down to brass tacks. What does this actually mean for the business, for the bottom line? Let's quantify the strategic advantage here and look at the real-world impact on speed, cost, and the quality of your insights.
And I'm not talking about small incremental improvements here. When you put the old way and the new way side by side, well, the difference is absolutely dramatic.
I mean, just look at this comparison. With the traditional approach, your data freshness is measured in hours or even days. With this new approach, we're talking milliseconds, real time. In historical analysis, it goes from being this limited, super expensive project to something that's just built in and lightning fast. And of course, that cascades down to everything else, slashing development speed and massively cutting your operational costs. It's a completely different league.
Let's just zoom in on development speed for a second. Your average traditional BI project can take 18 months to implement, a year and a half. In today's market, that is an eternity. With this modern approach, we're seeing teams go from an idea to a fully working solution in just 3 to 6 months. That's not just faster, it's a fundamental change in your ability to react to the market and outmaneuver your competition.
And then there's the cost. We're seeing a 40 to 60% reduction in operational costs. Let that sink in. That's not a typo. We're talking about almost cutting your operational spending in half through automation and just being way more efficient. Like I said, this isn't a small tweak. It completely rewrites the economics of how you run your tech.
Okay, let's move on to our final and maybe most critical topic, preparing for an AI future. Because this whole conversation isn't just about fixing the problems of the past. It's about laying the essential groundwork for the intelligent systems that are coming and honestly are already here. This is the memory that AI needs to actually work well.
You know, everyone is talking about AI and large language models, and for good reason. The potential is massive. But here's the catch. An AI is only ever as good as the data you feed it. If you train it on a bunch of disconnected snapshots with no context, you're going to get unreliable, even dangerous results. For an AI to be truly trustworthy and effective, it needs that perfect contextual memory we've been talking about. It needs the full movie, not just the last frame. And that is exactly what this kind of system provides. It's the perfect foundation for smarter AI. It can feed a large language model the exact decision paths and historical dependencies so it understands why things happened. It can generate what you might call thought graphs to guide the AI's behavior, keeping it on the rails and aligned with your rules. What this all means is that you're creating a safer, smarter AI that's grounded in the actual verifiable truth of your organization. So all of this really brings us to one final critical question you should be asking yourself. Is your organization's data ready to teach an AI? It's no longer just about whether you have a lot of data. It's about whether that data tells the complete story. Are you just sitting on a pile of disconnected snapshots, or do you have a true, complete history? Because looking forward, your company's single most important strategic asset might not be its products or its people, but its ability to teach an AI with a perfect memory. And that's something to think about.